Okay, I'm going to show you what I did to press in one bearing and what I'm going to do to press in the other as well. So I don't have a special tool that they mention in the in the manual. So what I did was I took one of my bearings. Well, this is the used bearing, the bearing that came out. But I put that in on the Speedo side. And then I just used my socket to drive it in. So it's kind of an odd size. This one I got a 1 3/16 inch. This isn't metric, this is inches. So 1 3/16 inch, and that just fit perfectly on the outside of the bearing race, and fit nicely inside the space here where the Speedo drive slots over. So I put that one in, and that went fine and seated nicely and bottomed out just perfectly. But of course, when you go to put the axle back in, what's going to end up happening is you're going to put it in from the other side, from the brake side, and it's going to, it's going to want to push that bearing out. So I didn't want it to have to come out again. So what I did was I took my axle and I put it in my freezer. And wrapped it up in some cloth so it wouldn't get the freezer all dirty. Put it in the freezer for about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours actually. Came out really nice and cold, and as a matter of fact, it's still cold, and it's been out of the freezer now for about 20 minutes, and it's still cold to the touch. So while it didn't go through the inner race, it did start nicely, and I had greased up the inner race as well. And what I did then was I just took my big vice grip. Oh, sorry, here we go. Took my big vice grip and I just wrapped the other side of the axle with a rag. And I put the vice grip on, and it held it nicely so that it wouldn't spin. And then I just took a bunch of washers that I had. I had a whole series of washers. I put the washers on, and I took my wrench and I started tightening down on the nut that holds the Speedo drive on, and just slowly cranked it down, and finally it bottomed out. So I know that it had drawn the axle over all the way through the center race of the bearing. So now that bearing is seated in the wheel, and the axle is seated in the inner race of that bearing. So it's ready to go. So now I'll do similarly with this side. I'll take the other bearing, I'll grease it all up, and I'll put that in there, and I'll switch it around. I'll take the washers and bring them over here, put the vice grip on the other side to keep it from spinning, and then just slowly apply some pressure. Just kind of slowly tighten the nut down until it's pulled up on the bearing. And the nice thing about it is those washers just press on the outside of the outer bearing race. They're not pressing on the inner bearing race. There's just enough of a space there, and the washers are flat. And I did check to make sure they're flat. That's important. Make sure it's not a bent up, buggered up old washer that's got a dish in it. But these ones were flat, and they just pressed nicely against the outer race on the bearing, so it won't damage the bearing. So I should be able to just squeeze that in. It's too bad. It's kind of it's a little bit of an oddity. It's not what I'm used to anyway. I'm used to ones with a spacer in the center, and that's just a lot easier, right? You just pull the axle out and it goes through, and it's just easier. But that's okay. This is doable. And like I said, I didn't end up having to fab up any new tools, which I was really looking at. I'm like, okay, am I going to have to make something here? But no, this worked out really well. I had the right size socket to drive in the first bearing, and then just use this, because I've also used this method to take things out as well. Just use the nuts that the things come with. Anyway, we're getting closer. Got the new tire mounted. Did that today, and the new tube. And we're going to finish off the bearings here and get the brake in place and reinstall the wheel on the bike. Fun times.